angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
The Democrat Party. I have personally declared the party to be a terrorist organization. And every registered Democrat is now on the no-fly list. No-fly would be a lot better. Fewer psychotic episodes on airplanes. The hatch door no longer flying off the side of the airplane in flight. That's right, Democrats can no longer fly. Don't even come to the airport. Don't want to see you there. Democrats, that is, see, that was Madonna, of course, on the Mall in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump had been elected president, and a mob of demented, mentally ill women who are genitally obsessed, they gathered on the Mall. It was supposed to be a rally for Hillary Clinton's electoral victory, and then she lost. Remember that? That was hilarious. And they gathered by the billions on the Mall, and they threatened the world and to blow up the White House and the usual stuff. And it's perfectly in keeping with the Democrat Party today, because you may have seen, it's possible that you saw the story, that they've got a woman who is definitely a Democrat. She's most certainly a Democrat. They refer to her as a Broadway legend, and that doesn't mean she's a streetwalker. She apparently does plays in theaters, things like that, and sings and stuff. The Broadway legend Patti LuPone declares multiple times during an interview that President Trump's Kennedy Center, quote, should get blown up because the Democrats, they're a radical suicide death cult. They blow things up. They firebomb Jewish people and Tesla dealerships and Tesla automobiles. Everyone's in danger as long as the Democrats are on the loose. I did see, I talked about it yesterday. What did we have? 5 homicides over the 3-day weekend, Memorial Day weekend in Washington, D.C., and then 2 more yesterday in Washington, D.C., 2 more homicides. And police say that every one of them perpetrated by a Democrat. They put out a press release this time. They said every single one perpetrated by a registered Democrat or a wannabe registered Democrat, but too disorganized to actually register as Democrats. Democrat Party. Now, Patti LuPone, famous, she's an award-winning actress. She's won awards for acting. She plays dress-up and make-believe, and her anger counts. It's extraordinary. So, yeah, the Kennedy Center, no less, should get blown up. And I laughed this morning when I saw that, until I noticed that the Kennedy Center had been blown up and it was in rubble and everybody inside was killed. It was quite tragic, terrible thing. Patti LuPone, she'll probably get an award for that too. She'll get a Tony. She got a Tony, which is kind of a funny name for an award, but amazing stuff. So we got that because they're terrorists. They're all terrorists or wannabe terrorists also. And also we were trading yesterday, as we often do. Michael Piercy and myself and Randy and Kevin, we have a text thread and we share a lot of things. And boy, there was more. It wasn't just Patti LuPone, because I was looking at what the Democrats are saying now. And there's another Democrat, a well-known Democrat. They're very well-known, all these Democrats, very well-known. And they're saying the only thing that can fix the world is a genocide. They're calling for but aren't they complaining about what they say the Israelis are perpetrating against the terrorists in the Gaza, that they're stop the genocide. And now they're all about start the genocide. But this time it's the Democrat genocide. It's the genocide against white people. You see, you got to have the white people genocide because there are too many white people, and medicine and electricity and instantaneous global communications and every invention that anybody uses any day of the year. Remarkable stuff, but we've got another, genocide. We've got to have the genocide because Democrats. And it's the guy, who is the guy? It's the guy that murdered the 2 Israeli embassy personnel in that double assassination. Too bad it wasn't a suicide attack, but, now he's in a jail cell. Maybe we should give him Jeffrey Epstein's jail cell or something like that. But this is kind of an amazing story. The accused Israeli embassy staff shooter, I like to call him shooters. He's a murderer and assassin. Told friends, he's talking to his friends because he's got a lot of friends, the Jew-hating psychopathic Nazi killer. He said the America would have to actually genocide white people. You don't normally hear genocide being used as a verb like that, have to genocide white people. So he's illiterate, too. He's a Democrat. He went to public school probably and would have to actually genocide white people to become normal. That's what he said, normal. That's not my definition of normal. But if you're a Democrat, it might very well be your definition of normal because they're very, very mentally ill. And at Politico, the left-wing Politico, they've got a writer there, a typist for the radical left, mentally ill Democrat Party. You know, he just amazing stuff. He has created a shadow cabinet for the Democrats, and he's got like Bill Nye the Science Guy in there. Bill Nye the Science, who doesn't even have a degree in anything. He's got a bachelor's degree in engineering, and then he did a children's show. So Democrats think that he's some kind of a scientific guru because of their tiny little brains. And they're very mentally ill. All of them, every Democrat mentally ill. And they've got Newsweek magazine. Newsweek has an article. They've got they declare that Trump supporters love Putin. Trump supporters love Putin because they create these childlike fantasies in their tiny little demented, mentally ill, drug-addled brains. And then after a while, they repeat them 1,000 times, and like their boy Gurgle, they start to believe them. You remember their boy Gurgle said, a lie told once remains a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. So they tell the lie 1,000 times, and then they themselves start to believe their own fictions, their own fantasies, like Trump voters like Putin, that admire Putin. And that's a fantasy that they made up in their mental illness, and then they repeat it 1,000 times, and they believe it themselves. There is not a Trump voter in the country that supports Putin, but the Democrat Party, with their rabid mental illness, they can't get away from it. Isn't that amazing? You people, I got to tell you. And they got an update out of the Washington Post, too, with their guy, Jonathan Capehart, he's got his job for all the wrong reasons. But when Joe Biden was going around saying that the Georgia election laws that Republicans passed there to try to secure elections, Jim Crow 2.0, which are all Democrat laws. Every Jim Crow law was always a Democrat law. There was never a Jim Crow that was not a Democrat law. Every single Democrat is Jim Crow. Jim Crow wasn't an actual person. It was another fantasy that they made up, and they tagged some guy that didn't exist with their racist laws. The Democrats did. Oh, it's Jim Crow. There is no Jim Crow. You are Jim Crow. Every Democrat is Jim Crow. But they've got this Jonathan Capehart story because he resigned from the Washington Post editorial board. This is some time ago now, because they refused to be crazy enough about what Joe Biden was calling Jim Crow 2.0 in Georgia. And then, of course, the Georgia elections had a literal record number of black voters voting on Election Day, because everything they say is the opposite of the truth. It's pretty amazing stuff. And so I've got an update on Jonathan Capehart because he is, he's got an update. Amazing stuff. Yeah, so blow up the Kennedy Center and genocide against white people and commit a racist genocide is what they're calling for. Create a shadow government because they live in this mentally ill world. And Trump voters love Vladimir Putin, according to Newsweek magazine. That is pretty amazing stuff. Yeah, Newsweek with their headline, MAGA divided as Trump turns on Putin. You're mentally ill. I mean, honestly, you should, if you have press passes to get into government buildings, they should all be taken away for anybody that works for Newsweek magazine.
Did I hear you correctly say that perhaps he was influenced by Gurgle and the Third Reich in terms of telling a big lie? I just want to make sure that's what I heard you say.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what I heard that correctly. Isn't that great? Yeah. So Jonathan Capehart, who, the columnist, who quit the editorial board at the Washington Post over a dispute with white colleagues. And Jonathan Capehart said that there was a woman there who's white, and that's all he sees because he's a devout racist. And he said that this woman, which is sexist, he's a gay man. I know that he's a gay man because he says it every time he starts to speak. And he wants everyone to know every time, I forgot for almost a minute until you reminded me. He said that she, this terrible white woman, was, quote, robbing me of my humanity. Well, I'm not sure that you have adequate humanity with which to be robbed, but that's okay because the Karen Tumulty at the Washington Post, she didn't agree. They had a little discussion, and he's got new self-promoting wah-wah out there. Oh, yeah, speaking of self-promoting wah-wah out there, Jake Tapper back at it again, too, because they got this book's getting more promotion than the Koran. And who's responsible for killing more people, the followers of the Koran or the left? That's an easy one. The left is clearly the front runner on that one. And they haven't been around for nearly as long, but never mind that. I think they have more pirates. I won't tell you what kind of pirates, though, because that's a discussion for another day. It's a little too early for that. So we're just scratching the surface on some of the Democrat stuff because they're really, really unwell. Oh, speaking of the Democrats, Dmitry Medvedev, he was actually president of Russia for a brief period of time, and he's Vlad the Impaler, Putin's right-hand man. And he yesterday got on Twitter, which was created by the American patriarchy. You're welcome. And he attacked Donald Trump, and he's talking World War III. World War III. You know, you guys, the left is just, they're a bloodthirsty lot. They certainly are. So Dmitry Medvedev is out there talking about World War III because President Trump had said something very disapproving about Putin's behavior, bombing and shelling Ukraine and all that, which is what he does because he's a communist, and that's what communists do. And the Democrat Party here in the United States, pretty darn close to being communist. We've had more Democrat Party suicide attacks in the United States in the last few years, certainly than we've had Russian suicide attacks, and I think we've had more Democrat suicide attacks than we've had Islamic suicide attacks over the last, how many years? 5 years. I'm not sure where to begin attacking Steve Scalise and the Republicans on the baseball field suicide attack, shooting President Trump through the ear, Butler, Pennsylvania suicide attack. They've got, goes on and on, self-immolating at the Israeli embassy in Washington, self-immolating at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta, although we still don't know whether that woman died or not, but that's interesting. They've got a lot of suicide attacks. We had the Democrat commit suicide at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas while inside of a rented Tesla because didn't want to use his own car, too expensive. But the Democrat Party is truly crazy, and firebombing the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania because the governor, who's Jewish, was too pro-Israel. So the Democrats had to firebomb him. They're big on firebombing, aren't they? In fact, there was a Democrat arrested. I told you the story yesterday at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. He had been expelled from Israel because he was engaged in a plot to firebomb, he's a Democrat, with Molotov cocktails, the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, the embassies in Jerusalem, technically, but the offices in Tel Aviv that he was hell-bent on firebombing because the Democrat Party is an anti-Semite party, and they run Harvard University and places like that. So we've got that. We got a lot of Democrat stuff. Also, speaking of Democrats, President Trump says he will meet with Gavin Newsom to talk hairstyles or what? What's that going to be about? No, over transgender, because Gavin Newsom wants men stealing women's trophies because they're all really screwed up in the head. They're not good at all. But in California, half the parents are like, yeah, let the tranny steal my daughter's trophy. The Democrat Party. Yes, sir. Actually, genocide against white people. Even Bill Maher, who I don't agree with anything he's ever said in his life, But even he's saying, hey, the Democrat Party might be getting a little wacky with this being pro-genocide thing against the Jews. You know, why would they? And P. Diddy's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. Child sex trafficking and torture and abuse and murder, plots to murder at least. Isn't that amazing? And Secret Service suspends agents caught fighting outside of Obama's home. Obama's multi-million-dollar home in the shadow of the main mosque in Washington, D.C. I got King Charles in England. I met him, my old pal, King Chuck. He was only Crown Prince Chuck when I filled him in on what was going on in Washington. But that was another. So the Democrats, I filled my cup with crazy news once again. And we remain at 888-630-9625. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris. Now, here in Washington, D.C., where murder is normal because there are so many Democrats, and violent crime and all that. You know, we've got a lot of law enforcement. What do we have? 17 law enforcement agencies in Washington that have the power of arrest. I believe that's correct. 17 different law enforcement agencies. And one of them is the United States Secret Service. And the Secret Service has, you got your plainclothes Secret Service, Presidential Protective Detail. They do a lot of things. The Secret Service do a lot of things. They were under the Treasury Department. They should be again, instead of under the Department of Homeland Security. But in Washington, we also have the Uniform Division of the United States Secret Service, the USSS UD, United States Secret Service Uniform Division. And they provide security around the White House. You see them like police uniforms, nice-looking, very nice-looking police uniforms. And they drive around in cars, United States Secret Service, marked police cars with cherries on the top and, you know, insignia on the doors and all that. And they provide security to embassies and ambassadors' residences and a lot of places in Washington, D.C. But here's a fun story from Mediaite, the left-wingers at Mediaite. Secret Service suspends agents. I think they're not agents. I think they're uniform division. Caught fighting in a fist fight outside Obama home. Quote, unacceptable, unquote. What's unacceptable? I'm not sure, but I think this might have DEI written all over it. I've got this for you coming up. 2 Secret Service agents have been suspended after they were caught on camera fighting outside former President Barack Obama's home in a fist fight. And it's 2 ladies, 2 female agents. Well, ladies may be the wrong room. That's coming up. I want to get back to these 2 Secret Service women, 2 women, Uniform Division, Secret Service, providing the physical security outside of former President Barack Hussein Obama's house, which resides in the shadow of the main mosque in Washington, D.C. Most beautiful sound you ever heard is the call to prayer, you may recall. And so the Obamas, and they bought that house for $8 million from Joe Lockhart, who had been a Democrat Party political apparatchik and White House press secretary under Bill Clinton. And then he made a lot of money because the Democrat Party, they fund the party. And Joe Lockhart, who I've known for many years and is a perfectly nice guy, and he had this $8 million house and he sold it to the Obamas, I think, so he could buy something bigger, you know, because the Democrat Party political machine can be very lucrative, But it's off of Massachusetts Avenue, Gesundheit, in the Embassy Row neighborhood. And in fact, if you go across Mass Ave, as they call it, Massachusetts Avenue, by the mosque, go across up another little side street, and you'll arrive at one of the Clintons' multi-million-dollar mansions. a great classic old 1930s red brick mansion that the Clintons bought in the same neighborhood off of Embassy Road, because it's good to be a Democrat. You know, they all get rich. Now, there is this is kind of fun, a Susan Crabtree, who is Real Clear Politics, a reporter with Real Clear Politics. Susan Crabtree posted the story. She's the national political correspondent at Real Clear Politics, RCP. You have to abbreviate everything. But Susan Crabtree got the scoop. She got the video, and she writes, breaking scoop, is DEI still plaguing the Secret Service? Well, what are you implying, Susan Crabtree, that they are hiring women who are not good and they're women of color? Is that what Susan Crabtree is? It could be. Fracas outside Obama residence raises new questions, : They love their colons. Get a supervisor immediately before I whoop this girl's ass. That's the quote here in Susan Crabtree's reporting on her tweet. And she did get the scoop. Susan, congratulations to Susan Crabtree. She's telling the truth here. 2 female Secret Service Uniform Division officers got into a physical fight outside former President Barack Obama's D.C. residence while guarding it. See, they're supposed to be guarding it, and here and these 2 women, they're in a fist fight with each other, punching and screaming and cussing and all kinds of stuff, and they look like they're, a couple of toughies. One of them looked like she was definitely a tougher toughie than the one who was being beaten. That's how you can tell. The fracas occurred at roughly 2:30 a.m. early Wednesday morning. That's not this morning, but last Wednesday morning. According to 2 sources in the Secret Service community, they live in a gated community. It's very safe there. It's a community. The lack of professionalism was on display during the fight. It's true, they didn't look like they were one looked like she was pretty good at fighting, I got to say. The one on the right side of the video, she's throwing punches and she's got some moves on her. But the lack of professionalism was on display during the fight, and in a call one of the women made on a recorded Secret Service line to request a supervisor to come to the scene. And we actually have that here because Susan Crabtree at Real Clear Politics did a little gumshoe reporting and got some stuff.
I want to get a supervisor out here to Delta Zoo immediately before I whoop this girl's ass.
That's right. Get a supervisor down here immediately before I whoop this girl's ass. And I don't know. Was it a hate attack? Was it a racist attack? We're going to need to find out. Were there any transgender people involved? Because the Biden administration was in charge, Secret Service, and really Jill Biden, who's not a doctor, she was largely in charge too. And Jill Biden, she really loved the Secret Service. Do you know what I'm talking about? She really loved the Secret Service. She loved them. That's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. So the Susan Crabtree, the lack of professionalism on display, and the call, get a supervisor down here immediately before I whoop this girl's ass. And the woman officer who made the call was upset that her shift replacement, the second woman, was late and assailed her verbally, right, and physically when she finally did arrive to relieve her. Again, there's like 2:30 a.m., so maybe the shift change is supposed to be 2 a.m., and the second lady Secret Service Uniform Division officer showed up, not an agent. The media, they don't know. They use the words, but they don't know what they mean. So we got all that going. Audio of the early a.m. call is now circulating among agents and officers and is attached to this X post. It's unclear whether either woman was injured or whether they will be disciplined over the altercation. I've got to say, Michael and I were watching this morning and said they look like they both could, use a little discipline, a little bit of discipline, little spanking. They got pretty amazing stuff. They got some discipline coming to them. And so one of them looks like she might enjoy discipline as a recreational pursuit, but that's another thing altogether. So raising new questions among fellow Secret Service agents about the agency's lowering of hiring standards during the years of the major DEI push. That means the Biden administration, and of course during the Obama people. You know, they hire people for all the wrong reasons. Hey, wait, she's a WOC. She's a woman of color. You know what we need? We need more WOC Secret Service agents and WOC Secret Service officers providing presidential security and former presidential security. And if they're slapping each other around and doing, before I kick this, it's the, this is the Democrat Party. This is what they create because the left.
She can also holler at him a little bit.
I can discipline.
She can discipline. That's, that there's good deal of spanking going on in there. Oh, yeah, speaking of which, we got an update on the French First Lady beating up the French president, too. He is a Frenchman, so it's not really fair. But we got that. So this is a fun story. It's kind of an inside baseball Washington story, but it's true. And Susan Crabtree at Real Clear Politics is raising all the right questions, and she's talking to agents, I can tell. It has to do with the hiring standards during a major DEI push, when that was, to add more minorities and women to the ranks under previous Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle. And Kimberly Cheatle, I believe she's the one that was selected by Jill Biden, who's not a doctor at all, to become the head of the Secret Service. And then they had this left-wing ethos that they inflicted. And now you got these couple of B-words out there at 2:30 in the morning in front of Obama's house, his $12 million house. I think it's probably worth $12 million now. And I bought Barack Obama's house. I paid an extra $3 million because Barack Obama used to live there. Amazing stuff. So Cheatle, the Secret Service Director in the DEI era, the diversity, equity, inclusion era, Cheatle resigned under a cloud after the, the J-13, I love it, assassination attempt against Donald Trump. That's right. She resigned in disgrace after the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt, suicide attack on President Trump, shot through the ear, of course, and famous photographs and amazing stuff. So the Secret Service for years has experienced low morale and a severe manpower shortage. Well, that's not manpower. She's woman power. Woman power, right? And that's because the Democrats are in charge, and now everything's much better. Pretty amazing stuff. It's also contributing to lower hiring standards, right? And as the agency works to increase its agents and officers, trying to increase numbers in the ranks. But you know how the Democrats are when it comes to all this stuff. Man, oh, Manischewitz. Shall we, would you like to take a... Oh, is that right? Okay, well, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to our friend Donna calling from Frederick, Maryland. Donna, you're on the Chris Plante Show.
Well, good morning, Chris, and good morning to Michael Piercy, who always does an amazing job. I don't hear his voice as much as I used to, and it's nice to hear him every once in a while. But I wanted to comment about the little kerfuffle outside of Obama's residence.
Uh-huh.
I think, and if they haven't done this already, it would amaze me, but I believe that whoever's in charge of the Secret Service and the FBI and the Justice Department, those individuals that protect Democrats ought to be assigned to Democrats. They push this on all of us. I think it's about time they get a taste of their own medicine.
So the DEI, all the low standards, lowering your standards, DEI hires, hiring people for all the wrong reasons, as Democrats always do, based on race and genitalia, even though they don't recognize or acknowledge gender because they're very confused about that. All Democrats are. But you think that all the DEI hires should be assigned to protect now former President Joe Biden, former President Barack Obama, and if there is a future Democrat president, hopefully there never will be because the party will be abolished. But if there's a future Democrat president, they should only have DEI Secret Service protection?
Correct. You reap what you sow. They hoisted this upon all of us, and it brings me back to Butler, which was the most alarming thing our country's gone through since the Kennedy assassination. And, I'm sorry, I don't have compassion for people who didn't have compassion for our president and his administration and the literal hell they've put us all through. I'm just, I feel bad. I feel this way. It's not how I'd normally think, but in light of everything we've gone through, from the pandemic and all the other nonsense, the wars, endless wars, I think it's time for things to change in a good way for the American people.
Time for a change. Things, they are a-changin'. I like your idea that the Democrats, if the Democrats want to lower standards for presidential security, then they should be the ones to experience the lowered standard in presidential security. And Dr. Jill Biden should not be left in charge of the Secret Service just because every now and then she might think that the head of her detail living in the vice president's residence is a handsome man, and I'll just leave it at that. But Donna, it's a strange town, and these Democrats, they have a lot of strange proclivities. Many of them are sexual, and many of them are gender oriented. And if we had a news media in this city, they'd be reporting a lot of things that they're not reporting. That's been true for years, though, hasn't it, Donna?
Yes, it has. And, I love it when you say every day is an IQ test, because I'm hoping that many Democrats are seeing through the veil, seeing through all the falsehoods we've been told. We know there's sex trafficking in this country. We know there's drug trafficking. We know they have hidden bunkers. I mean, there are a lot of things that haven't fully yet to be realized by the public, but people are catching on. It's slow and steady. And at the very end, I think we will see justice. We have to be patient. The wheels of justice turn very slowly.
Well, that's certainly in evidence right now, and it's a good old saying. The wheels of justice turn slowly or grind slowly, and that's absolutely true. And we're watching it now. And also, Donna, I think you're right that we're even seeing it in polling off of college campuses that young Americans, college and not in college, are wising up to what's going on and to the fact that they're being lied to all over the place. And you got to keep in mind that the Democrat Party is the left. They're not liberals anymore. I think the Democrat Party used to be a party of liberals. Now the Democrat Party is the party of leftists, and they're shooting people and firebombing places, and they're self-immolating, and they're committing suicide and suicide attacks. And, that's political fanaticism all over the place, and their racial division, their gender division. They don't know how many genders there are. The Democrat Party has lost its ever-loving mind. But I do think that, in particular, young people and college-age people are waking up, and there's been very little reporting on it, but there are studies and polls that have shown that people on college campuses are more and more leaning conservative and waking up to the bourgeois that they've been fed, which is a really great thing. I mean, it happened during the Reagan years, too. It happened to me. I'm one of the people that it happened to during the Reagan years. That, I was raised and weaned on the left-wing propaganda, and then all the lies they told about Ronald Reagan became very clear during the first 4 years of Ronald Reagan's presidency, when everything went great and the media continued to lie about it. Said, hey, look, everything's wonderful, and they'd tell you that it was terrible, and it's like, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes stuff, and they're doing it again. And it reminds me, Donna, of the book by the Soviet author named Elena Gorakova, her book, A Mountain of Crumbs, where she wrote, the rules are simple. They lie to us. We know they're lying to us. We know they're lying, but they keep lying to us, and we keep pretending to believe them. And I've got to say, that was the Soviet Union. And Elena Gorakova, they're in her book, A Mountain of Crumbs. And now, in the United States, these are the rules. The left, forget about the Democrat Party, the left has set up the same set of rules. They really are the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't collapse, it morphed. And the Democrat Party is carrying on the traditions, the horrible, blood-drenched, violent, murderous, dishonest, lying traditions of the Soviet Union. The communists there, the Democrats here, what's the difference? We're at 888-630-9625. Thank you, Donna.
So say it with me. See, say Broadway. The future is ours.
Susan Crabtree has provided more detail. She wants to report the story. It's crazy. It's like she's in the news business and she's a journalist or something like that. Susan Crabtree says more detail about the reason for the fight. Multiple Secret Service sources say one woman, uniformed division officer, was triggered because the officer coming to relieve her at the end of her shift was late. Another well-placed Secret Service source says the replacement officer was only a few minutes late, and that the woman officer who started the fight wanted a Dodge Durango and not the Ford Explorer that the other officer arrived in. The officers apparently have a choice of what cars they can check out when they go on duty, provide relief for a shift. So, and then Sarah says, well, if that's all it takes to set you off, then this officer is dangerous to have around. But it's a Democrat world. We're just living in it. The Democrats. Well, I hope they sort that out. I really do. Because, you got to hire some Democrats. And what did the woman say in the what she wanted a supervisor to show up because otherwise what was going to happen? Something terrible?
I want to get a supervisor out here to Delta 2 immediately before I whoop this girl's ass.
Whoop this girl's ass. And that ass getting whooped. Man, oh man. I'm telling you. At Politico is a left-wing newspaper of sorts. It's online. Everything's just online, right? Politico. And they've got a piece that they put together. Here, they love the Democrat Party. They say, here's who the party, you don't even just say which party because they know it's the Democrat Party. Here's who the party should tap. When they say tap, I don't think they mean what it sounds like. To take on Trump and refresh the Democratic brand. Got to refresh the Democratic brand. And so this person there, Bill Scherr, oh, sure, like he went to Harvard. Bill Scherr put together a list of people, the shadow cabinet. And just to give you a hint, a clue, the EPA administrator would be Bill Nye, the science guy. He's got a bachelor's degree in engineering, and he did a children's show. And these people, their brains are not up to the task of really doing anything serious.